Hey guys, kinggath here, and welcome to Bethesda Mod School. This is going to be the first lesson where we're kind of merging two classes. So we've been going with the questing line and the dialogue line over the past few months, and now they're kind of going to converge. So I'm going to take pretty much all the information you've learned in both, we're going to combine them together, and we're going to make a quest that's run entirely by dialogue, or mostly by dialogue. There'll be one trigger that's not dialogue related. So basically, we're going to take the kinggath character that we have in, and we're going to repurpose his little conversation here and turn it into a quest. And then I'll show you how you tie all that in, how you trigger the different stages and such from within dialogue, and then we'll add another little bit of dialogue for turning in the quest. So if you've only done one or the other, so if you've only gone through the questing or you've only gone through the dialogue and you want to go through this as well, I'd recommend you go through that other branch of videos as well. So it should be, I believe on dialogue we were up to 104, and as questing, you can see I named up here, we were up through 105, so this is going to be questing 106. And I'll probably put both lesson names in here just to make sure people know that this is kind of that convergence. So this will happen more and more the deeper we go. I've been trying to lay down, and the reason I keep starting new classes, as it were, is because there's so much baseline information. This foundational knowledge I know is real boring and real hard to get into because you don't have anything to show or much to show from it at the end. And I've always been one of the people that fights that stuff when I am in school. Like, I'm always the type that just can't wrap my head around, like, why do I need all this crap? But it's always, in this case, and I think most teachers, when they're showing you that stuff, it's because they know that the stuff you create on top of the foundational knowledge will be way better. So like when I'm laying all these lessons out, it's because I'm thinking about, man, if I had known all this stuff when I started, my mods now wouldn't be such dumpster fires when you look at the content in the CK. So like there's a lot of, if you think about some settlements, there's a lot of underlying problems and constant bug fixes because I didn't know everything up front and I just kept running into more and more problems. So I'm basically trying to teach past me, by proxy through you guys, how to do this correctly. So if you feel like I'm going too slow, I mean, this is why I post all the videos up and show the prerequisite knowledge so you can jump around, because I know that's way more motivating. But for those of you guys who are sticking it out and getting through all this foundational stuff, you're going to have a much better time in the long run because your mods won't be so broken. So if you're planning on building something huge in the long run, these little tidbits, starting with these is a good place to go. But obviously, you do have to worry about your own motivation. That's an important part of modding, as I outlined in the very first video of this entire series. Okay, that's enough of me setting up here. It was something I wanted to address as we started these mergers, because it's going to get into more exciting territory now, and I'm sure some of you guys have been wanting this particular piece of information for a while now. Okay, so we're going to start with this dialogue quest. Now, normally I like to keep a separate dialogue quest and a quest that is just for my actual quests for operating. So what I would end up doing in this case is, because we're repurposing here, I've just made a duplicate of our last dialogue plugin. I'm actually going to rename this, and I would start a new quest just for the dialogue. And when I say just dialogue, I mean for stuff that is only going to be just spoken arbitrarily. It has nothing to do with any quest objectives. So the problem is, if we start putting quest objectives and things on the dialogue quest, well, then when we go to complete that quest and give the player their experience, now all of their dialogue is stored on a quest that we should be stopping to release that memory, and we can't because it keeps all their dialogue. So that's why I like to keep it separated. So what we're going to do here is we're going to call this, we're going to first change this prefix to quest. And instead of dialogue, we'll just put intro quest. Okay, and then if I wanted to do another quest with all the miscellaneous dialogue, like our hellos and such, then I could start a new quest for that. I'm not going to bother here because we only set up one line, but if we had set up a bunch of combat lines and stuff, I would move that over to a different quest. So for now, we're just going to rename that to start. I'm going to go ahead and save that. All right, so the next thing we need to do is figure out what we're going to do for this particular quest. So I think what I'm going to do is, instead of saying, you know what, forget it, I have another right here, we're going to send the player on a quest to get Gath a new wrench. So we'll start by setting up our dialogue, and you can do this. This is one of those things I mentioned before. There's a dozen different ways to skin a cat. You can approach this whatever way you like. I just happen to be doing dialogue first. We could do quest stages first, etc., because we know approximately what's going to happen. But I want to just start with dialogue because that's what we left off with here. So we're going to change this line to, let's see. I know how you can make this right. I've got a lead on another. Go fetch it for me. because that's how NPCs in Fallout 4 treat the player. So let's record that real quick. So click on here and hit record. I know how you can make this right. I got a lead on another. Go fetch it for me. Save that, and then we'll hit OK. Okay, so we've changed that. So that's gonna trigger. So we'll make that trigger our objectives, which we'll show. I'll show that in a minute. But then we're gonna have two other things. One is what happens when the player. This is a line that often I find writers forget, and I think it's kind of important for immersion. Is the player will naturally activate that NPC again and want to hear more. And this is a good spot to do some of that dialogue randomization that we talked about in one of the earlier dialogue lessons, where we give the character a few different responses that it's basically asking about the last thing they asked them to do. So first I'm going to save because I'm terrified of the creation kit crashing. And then we're going to go ahead and set that up. So we're going to go into our miscellaneous here, and we're going to use our hellos, and we are going to add, and we actually already have this extra group that's not being used for anything. I probably added that by mistake, so we'll go ahead and reuse this. And we're going to call this, let's see, KG Quest. We will call this a in progress group. That's wow, I cannot speak. That is what that's going to be. And then we'll put in a couple of lines here. Let's see, we'll say, had a chance to snag that wrench yet? And we'll just put this face as question. All right, and then we'll go ahead and record this. And here we go. Had a chance to snag that wrench yet? I don't know why I hesitated on that. But that's all right. We'll go ahead and save that. Save, close. Okay, and then hit OK there. We'll go ahead and do another one. I see you don't have my wrench yet. All right. We'll make it disappointed. Oh, I forgot to do it. I see you don't have my wrench yet. Save that. And then what's the face for that? Is there disappointed as a face? It takes a while to get used to what the faces are. You kind of got to, I'll go irritated, sure. Okay. And then we'll do a kind of sarcastic one. All right, I'll record this. I'd be a lot friendlier if I had a wrench. Save that. Okay. I think there's a sarcastic face. Yep, here we go. Okay, all right. And then we're going to force all these random. And then we're going to need to set up conditions on this so that this will happen only after the player has a quest. So we'll set those up in a second. We're going to set up our quest stages. And then we'll also need a dialogue to turn this in. So we'll come back and set all this up. I am going to do something before I forget, and that's move this above. So basically, if you remember in the dialogue tutorials I've shown you, I talked about how the priority queue, as soon as one is eligible, it will go down the list here and find them. And we want to make sure, because this hello generic is always eligible, we want to take our ones that are going to be conditioned, which we are going to condition this in a minute after we set up our quest stages. We want to make sure that when that's eligible, that it actually has a chance to play. So I'm going to move that up, but I'll go over that again after we set up those stages and we can condition this correctly. So let's go back to our scenes. We're going to set up a new scene. So let's rename this one. Let's see, starts quest as our scene, and then we'll add a new one, and we'll call this turn in. Now, this wouldn't necessarily need a scene because we're not actually going to have the player say much, but I just wanted to show you how to set up multiple scenes over here because we didn't really cover that in the last one. So now we have a second scene here, and we'll end up to control which one he says at any given time. We'll set up conditions, which we're going to do all of that when we set up the quest stages, and then you guys will it'll kind of click, I think. So we'll do it just the same way we did the other one. We'll do a new actor. We will add our character. Add a phase at the end here. Now, because the player doesn't need to say anything in response, maybe we could set that up. We're just going to do one phase on here. We could also have done this with just one of these miscellaneous pieces of dialogue in the same way that we set up those other ones, but I just want to show you guys setting up multiple scenes. So we're going to go ahead and do a dialogue here, and we'll face the player, and we'll bring this up. Let's see here. Oh, great. You found it. That makes 2 of us. Haha. Mine was in my toolbox all along. All right. Gath is kind of a dick. Let's see here. We'll do friendly. All right. Record. Oh, great. You wait. Why did that do that? Sometimes it does. Sometimes it starts right away, and other times it doesn't. All right. Let's try this again. Oh, great. You found it. That makes 2 of us. Mine was in my toolbox all along. And then we will give them their reward, which will just be experience. We're not even gonna pay them for the pleasure. Okay, so we'll hit OK there, and then now we're gonna need to set up some stages. But as always, we're gonna go ahead and save this. So let's bring this back up here, and let's set up our quest stages. So the first thing we're gonna set up here are our typical stages that we had in our previous quests. So before it was based on entering a trigger box. Now it's going to be the player talking to kinggath. So Gath gives quest. That will be our first one there. And the next will be that player loots wrench. So that after they loot the wrench, we're gonna. So basically, after Gath says the little bit here, I know you can make this right. We're gonna send that. We're gonna give them a quest objective. So that's why we need a stage. And then when they pick up the wrench, we want to give them another objective that says go give the wrench back to Gath. So we need another one. And then finally, we're gonna need one for when they turn it in. So player returns to Gath. Okay, and then that will complete the quest. That's gonna set up our XP and everything. Okay, so before we set up these any further, we got to do one thing, and that is to set a name for our quest. So previously, this was just our dialogue quest. We didn't actually need one, and we want to make sure that this actually shows up in their log. So right now, just a little reverse thing. I'm sure I talked about this in a previous, but just to recover it, is right now we have this start game enabled, but it actually won't show up in the quest log until an objective comes up. But if you give the player an objective for a quest that doesn't have a name, then it will just show up a blank entry in their quest log. It's very annoying and terrible looking. I don't know why Bethesda even allowed it, because it just looks terrible. So we're going to fix that. We're going to make sure we have a quest here. So we're going to just call it wrench hunting. We'll just call it wrench hunt. And then we need to change the type. We're going to change it to a side quest. And the difference between these, again, this is something else I've covered. Miscellaneous, you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with in-game, that there's the little miscellaneous section in your quest log that will put it under there. The Minutemen, Railroad, Institute, Brotherhood, and these DLC, these have to do with how these are filed for the sake of achievements. They also determine which music will play after you finish them, and same with main quest. So we don't want any of that stuff to happen. That's why we're going to call ours a side quest. I occasionally have used main quest for things like the major quest line in Conqueror, and that is because I actually like the big instrumental epic music to play. One of the things I've been considering from that note is to not mess with people's achievements, is to just figure out what music that is and just force it to play in response to the quest being completed. That would be absolutely possible, though I think it would have to go over top of the vanilla music, because there is music that plays even when a side quest completes, just to let you know that you get, your little boost of XP and everything. And speaking of, we got to set up some quest XP to make sure that they actually get some sort of reward. So we'll go XP. This is a really easy quest. In fact, I'm even going to put, so Gath is in Sanctuary. I think I'm just going to go put a wrench in that hardware store that's in Concord, so nice and quick. So we'll go ahead and call this a low level smaller. All right, so now our stuff is set up so that when we give them objectives, they're actually going to show up. So the wrench, this will show up as a quest for them. It's got the side quest flag so that it will show up. So you need to have the type selected and you need to have the name, and then the XP will make sure that they actually get a reward at the end. So we'll go ahead and hit OK and save once more. All right, so now we've got a lot of it done. Now we've got to just do a few more things here. So first we need to do some conditions based on these stages. So when is stage 10 going to happen? After Gath gives the quest. So that's going to happen in here. So if we head into our starts quest scene here, and when we want them to get the quest on this particular dialogue point. So we're going to double click this, and you see down here this set parent quest stage, and we're going to just go ahead and do that. So this is, you'll notice that there's two of these. One is when they start speaking the line, and that's on the left here, and then if they finish speaking the line right here, and that's what we want. Right after he says, "Go fetch it for me," boom, quest log will change. Another way we could do this is we could run a fragment and type in and run the code command set stage. I hate fragments. I've mentioned this many times. I'm going to continue to mention it over and over again. They're kind of a mess. They're very difficult to organize. It's a very good way to lose track of where your scripts are when you're packaging, so I'm just not a big fan. I love this. There's this set stage thing is all over the dialogue system. So I find as often as you can, if you can condition off of your dialogue based on the conditions system or off of the quest stage system, it's real easy. I mean, you can do it from the phases. You can set stages. You can do it from any of these individual dialogue choices. You can set stages. It's a really, really powerful system, and it keeps your plugin nice and clean. You don't have all these little rogue scripts everywhere. So I highly recommend getting used to anytime you need to condition anything in dialogue. Get used to doing it with quest stages. There's no penalty for having a million quest stages in here, other than you have to scroll through and look at them all. But there's no problem with that. So let's head back to our scene, because there's one more thing we want to do, and that's we don't want this quest to keep starting over and over again, or we don't want Gath to keep saying these things. So after the quest has started, we don't want this greeting to be enabled anymore. So to do that, we're going to go in here and we're going to set a condition, and we're going to call it get stage done. This is another thing you will hear me cover a lot. There are two things, and a lot of developers, a lot of Quest developers who put up tutorials recommend, and Bethesda uses this a lot as well, using get stage. I do not. I do not like get stage at all. I like get stage done. And the reason for that is because under my recommendation of using Quest stages to flag everything, get stage becomes a problem. So get stage means that the last stage that was completed, so and by completed I mean that the stage was just set. So something like, so it's kind of a weird thing to think about, because we're checking, is stage done, get stage done. So you would assume that when the stage is set, it's done. Another way to think about it, and I think the way a lot of us would naturally think about this, is when we're setting the stage, we don't mean that stage is done. That means that's the current stage that's happening. And that is also how the game kind of views it, which is, to me, it's kind of confusing. But basically, the last stage that was set from anywhere, it could be from a script, it could be from one of these little checkboxes here, that is considered the current stage of the quest. So when you use the get stage condition, it's only looking for that. So the problem then becomes, let's say you had a complicated dialogue tree and you were setting stages throughout it so that your game could react to what the player choices were or things like that. Well, then any of your things that were based on get stage might not be true anymore, because you were setting stages all over the place and not thinking about it. So I find get stage done is much safer, because then I can treat each stage as it either happened or it didn't. So then it's, when I look for get stage done, I'm checking, hey, has that thing already happened at some point? I don't care when it happened. It doesn't have to be the thing that just happened, as long as it's happened in the past. So in this case, we're checking, did the stage Gath gives a quest happen? And we want to say equals 0, which means it didn't happen yet. So basically what we're saying is, after stage 10 is done, after that stage 10 has happened, we don't want this to be valid anymore. So we're saying while it equals 0. If stage 10 had been finished, this right here would evaluate to true, which means, so yes, which is represented as a 1. So you're going to find this a lot throughout the condition system. 0 means false, 1 means true. So you're saying with the conditions, you're saying if this side matches this, then it's true. If it doesn't, it's false. So in this case, we want, as long as this hasn't happened yet, which means it's equal to 0, he can go ahead and speak this. But as soon as this is true, then it will fail this check. And so then this won't be eligible anymore. So hopefully, if you're a programmer, I'm sure that's super easy. If you're not a programmer, it might take you a few times to wrap your head around that, but hopefully that was clear. If any of you guys have any suggestions about how to frame that differently, I'm a programmer, so I'm naturally going to go toward programming terminology, and I might not be explaining that well for everybody. So if you have another way to think about this, a metaphor or something, please post it in the comments. I'm sure there are people who would appreciate reading that. Okay, so now we've got this scene all set up. So right now, the quest is going to be given to you at stage 10, or rather, after he says this, stage 10 will be set. We still have to set up the stage to make the objectives appear, as you guys remember from our previous quest guides. And then we've got this set up so it won't be eligible anymore after the quest has started. So another thing we did is we set up these random dialogue lines. We only want these to show up while the stage 10 is complete. So we're going to go ahead and do that condition again. So we're going to do get stage done, and we're going to say get stage 10 Gath gives quest equals 1. But after the player turns it in, we don't want him saying these anymore. So we're going to go ahead and duplicate this, and we're going to go to our player returns to Gath. In fact, we're actually even going to change it to player loots wrench. Once that is true, we don't want these lines to be eligible anymore. So we'll say, basically, if get stage done 20, the player loots the wrench, as long as that's not true, or that's equal to 0, as long as that's not true, he can keep saying these lines. So these lines will be eligible while the player has the quest, but before they go pick up the wrench. As long as that's the case, he's just going to randomize between these 3 lines because we have force all children random on right here. So anytime one of these things fails, so if 10 hasn't been done yet, then this will fail. So before the player receives the quest, he's not going to say these lines. And once the player loots the wrench, he's also not going to say these lines anymore. So now we have those set up so that they're only going to be spoken at the correct time. Then the last one we need to do is right here. Oh, great, you found it. So we need to set up a couple of things here. First, we're going to set up that after he speaks this, we're going to go ahead and set stage 30. Player returns to Gath. So they've returned. Now we can do that. And then in our stage, we'll handle things like giving XP and stuff. And I'll show you that in a moment. But we also need to condition this of when should he say this. And we're going to say get stage done. And that's 20. So the player loots the wrench is 1. And then we're going to duplicate that. And we also want him not to say it a second time. So after they turn in the quest, we don't want them to keep saying it. So we'll change this to 30. So as long as that is false, so 0. As long as stage 30 hasn't happened yet, you can go ahead and speak this. And this will make it so that he only speaks it once. So the last condition we're going to put in there is we're going to make sure that they actually have the wrench in their inventory. They didn't just pick it up and go sell it. So we're going to go ahead and do get item count. And then we're going to change this run on to player. So we're going to check the player's inventory now, and we can select the form here. So hopefully I can find a, if I can remember what it's called. Is it called pipe wrench maybe? Yes, pipe wrench. So as long as they have a pipe wrench in their inventory and they went and grabbed it. So even though it might take a different one from their inventory, we might end up setting up a specific item for this and removing that special item. I might set up an actual quest item so that this can't even be false. But for now, this is something you might consider if you're doing fetch quests, especially if you're doing something that's not a special item. Like if you're just going to use a generic item. You guys know from setting up our quest items in some of the quest tutorials before that we can set them up. We can flag them so that they're flagged as quest objects, and then the player won't be able to sell them, which we'll probably set that up. But I just wanted to show this because get item count is a very useful little condition that you can use at various points. So we'll go ahead and set that. So now we have our dialogue condition, so it'll only ever be spoken once when it should be. And then it's going to set stage 30. Okay, and stage 30 is where we want the quest to be finished. So let's head it over our quest stages, and we'll set that up. So we'll say returns to Gath. The first thing we can do is we can complete the quest. We know that we want the quest to give them their XP, and it will be all done there. So now we're going to hit OK and save it, and we got a few more things to do still. We still need to actually make the quest function. We got to put our wrench into the world, things like that. But more importantly, I guess not more importantly, equally importantly, we need to set up objectives so the player can see what they're supposed to be doing. And I just saved there because the objective screen, if you don't remember, is kind of a landmine. I mentioned that in previous, is that for some reason, this particular screen likes to crash the creation kit if you don't close your quest and save it before opening. Don't know why that is, but it is. So just beware and be careful. So let's go ahead and start setting this up. So we're going to start with, actually, we should probably do aliases first now that I think about it, because we're going to want to point objectives at things. And so that way we don't have to keep visiting the screen again, this loathsome screen. So we've got Gath as an alias already that we set up in our previous dialogue thing. So now we're going to set up our wrench. So we'll go ahead and do a new reference alias. And we are going to, once this loads, we're going to go ahead and name this wrench. And we'll go ahead and flag this as a quest object so that it doesn't get screwed up. And now we need to set our wrench up. So we could have done, but because I know there's a hardware store, I want to keep this close by. We're not going to do that dynamic stuff, though you absolutely could. I've shown you guys how to do dynamic. It's very, very easy. Instead, we're going to create it in a container. And so we're going to need another alias for that. So let's go ahead and hit OK here. And we're going to go to new reference alias. And we are going to create ourselves a reference to a container. So we'll call this wrench container in specific reference. And now we're going to go put a container in the world. So let me find my render window, wherever it might be hiding back here. Where are you, guy? Up there. It is way back there. All right, so we're going to go to the Commonwealth. And we're going to find our hardware store. So I know it's in Concord. So let's let this load. Okay, where'd it go? Here we go. All right, we're going to type in CON, Concord. Okay, and then that'll bring this up over here. Nice and slow, CK, just the way I like it. I hope you guys who have been following along all these guides have gotten used to the snail speed that is the creation kit, and it hasn't burned you out yet. I assume if you've made it this far, then you're in it for the long haul. So let's head in over here. There are some tricks to make it load a little bit faster. I have just not learned them all, so this is one of those things that maybe I will learn one day and show them to you guys. One thing I do like to do is turn off the markers right away and then lock the layers. That is one thing that can make it a little faster, because the markers, while they don't render in the game, they do render in here, so it can slow things down. And then we're going to go ahead and lock, where's our freeze all other layers. There we go. So now I don't accidentally click on something. And the hardware store should be right over here. Yep, here it is. Nice little hardware. Perfect. All right, so we're going to go ahead and plant a container in here. Now, there's two ways we could do this. We could set up our reference alias to just grab one of these containers already. And the only reason I will suggest you don't do that is when you do that and it's not through this event-based find system, which I've shown you guys how to use before, you can accidentally introduce a precombine break, even though you are just even though you're not messing with any static. So precombine breaks are very, very bad. And it's very confusing why it happens and why it doesn't. I'm not even going to try and go into it all, but you can avoid it by setting up, adding your own reference to this cell. And and actually I should preface this and say that this is more likely to prevent this issue. It still can. Fortunately, the solution usually, if that happens, is that any mods that are modifying the precombine, they just have to go after yours in the load order, and that'll solve it. So just be aware that if you get people complaining that something you did is causing a problem, it can be easily fixed by people just changing their load order. So that's why, like for example, we have a lot of random stuff hidden in the world for sim settlements, especially for the brewery. We have lots of recipes hidden, and whenever people have problems with precombine breaking, they just have to move their world space editing mods below Sim Settlements, and that solves the problem. And because Sim Settlements is an ESM, that's not a big deal. So anyway, I digress. The point is when you're adding things to the world, just be careful. I suggest you freeze all the layers, and that you, as much as possible, use your own objects as opposed to existing objects in the game world, unless you're using this find matching reference system to fill stuff out, which I've shown you guys how to do already. So we're going to go ahead and go to container over here, and we're going to look for tool. Should be toolbox, and we're going to find, let's see, loot toolbox, and let's preview and find one we like here. Yeah, this little guy is perfect. So we'll go ahead and drop this right on top of this container here, and we'll spin it around. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and specific reference. We're going to grab this guy here, double click that, and we'll hit OK. And then we're going to say no to this autofill generic. And the reason we don't want to do this is because if you start adding location, alias, reference fill types to the vanilla world spaces, you introduce a vanilla edit and you risk causing all sorts of calamity with some of the vanilla quests. So it's just not worth doing. So we're going to call this, we're not going to call this optional. We want this to always be there. And the reason that, so realistically we could, if we wanted to, we could have created our own custom container and had a wrench start in there. But then if the player looted it before the quest started, and maybe sold it before it could be marked as a quest objective, that's a problem. And that's why we're going to dynamically create this in the container instead. So one thing to note is we need our container to come before the wrench in the aliases. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to create it. So I just shifted that by selecting it and using these arrows down here. I believe you can also use, you can use the left and right arrows on your keyboard. That also moves things around. So let's go ahead and open up our wrench again. And we've done this before, the creating items. This is, I think the only thing we haven't done is create our own container. I think we did it. We only did it before from the event system where we planted it in a container. So, but it's the same basic idea. You're going to go create ref object, create ref to object. We're going to do search for pipe wrench again. Here we go. And we're going to create it in, and then we're going to select our wrench container. And we've already flagged it as quest object, so we're good right there. And we'll go ahead and hit OK. And so now this is going to get created. Now this is actually going to happen as soon as this quest starts, which is a little bit of an issue with the same thing I mentioned, in that the player can loot it beforehand. Fortunately, because it's being created by this quest, it is flagged as a quest item, so the player could already have it in their inventory. So then in those circumstances, when you're setting up something like this, it's a good idea in your dialogue to add an option that's something like, oh, I already have that. I'm not going to do that right now. Just for brevity's sake, this is already going to be a pretty long lesson. So just keep that in mind, is that there are opportunities if you combine all this stuff together. A way to bypass this, to arrange so that this stuff is still disabled, there's a couple of ways we could do it. We could set it up to start disabled, and then we could manually trigger from a script on our quest stage to enable it. That's one way we could do it. Another way we could do it is we could have the trigger that starts this quest happen in a different quest. So it could be in, I mentioned that I like to have my quests that have objectives separated from my dialogue. That's another way we could do it. I will probably show you, demonstrate some of these methods in future lessons, but I just want to throw that stuff out there for those of you guys thinking ahead about all the little issues. You could go ahead and start thinking about how to tackle those. So we've got our little thing is going to get created in there. And so now we've got to set up our objectives. So let's go ahead and save one more time before we go into that nasty objective tab. And let's get back up here to KGQ quest, bring it back up. Okay, let's go to our objectives tab now. So the first objective is to get the wrench. Get the wrench. Or we'll just say get the wrench. We won't say pipe wrench or anything like that because it's probably, because it's a weapon, it could get randomly renamed based on the add-ons that it has or the mods that it has on it. So we'll go to target alias wrench. So now it will show an objective on the player's map once this shows up. And then next we're going to do return the wrench to Gath. I think that's what we called him. We didn't call him King Gath. So, all right. So then we'll target Gath as our alias. There we go. So now we've got our two objectives set 10 and 20. And now we're going to save once more. Lots of saving. You don't want to lose all this work in this monster of a quest tab. Okay. So now we need to show what happens when so we have all of our stages. We have various points where they can be set. They can all be set via, it's not true with number 20. We haven't set that up, but I'll show you guys that in a minute because we're going to have to deal with the fact that it's possible for the player to pick this up before they have the quest, so we'll have to deal with that in our objectives. So we'll deal with that in a moment. So let's start off with this. Let's do, they get the quest. We want to show the objective. So set objective displayed, and that was number 10. That was our first objective. So we're going to give them the objective to go get the wrench. All right, and then when they loot the wrench, which we'll set up how that triggers in a second, we'll say set objective completed 10. We're going to complete the objective that they have to loot the wrench, and then we'll say set objective displayed 20, and that's the second objective we said to give it back to Gath, and then we'll go ahead and compile that. All right, and then lastly, we have they complete the quest, so we'll do complete all objectives, and that will close off that last objective, and then we can also stop our quest. We don't need it anymore after this. Now, one of the things to be wary about is that once you stop a quest, the dialogue that's tied to it will no longer be available. So it's important to know. But stopping a quest is what will free it up from memory so that anything you had involved in this quest, any of these aliases, any characters like that, they can be set free. The game can clean those up. So it's a good idea to stop your quests when you don't need them. And it's also another argument for why you should separate out any of your quests that are just kind of one and done. Anything that or as much as possible, separate out your things with objectives from your dialogue, because this game is fragile in the amount of resources it has. Ask any Xbox player how often they crash, and they will thank you for doing something like this. So we'll go ahead and compile that. And so the complete quest over here, another way we could do this, we could, instead of using this checkbox, we could actually run, there's actually a little function called complete quest that we could, or it might be called complete. It's been a while since I've used it, but either way, that would work as well. So, and you'll find if you were to decompile a lot of my Conquer scripts, I believe I use the script method as well, but we'll get into that again in the future. Okay, so now there's two things we still need to tackle. One is we need to be able to set stage 20 when they loot the wrench, which I'm sure you guys can already think about how we've done that in the past. We've used some of those default alias triggers to do that, and that's fine. We can continue to do that. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll do the on container changed default script. As much as possible, using those default scripts is a good idea. They're built right into the game. It doesn't require you to manage another file. They're nice and easy to use. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we'll go default alias, and that should bring up, and I've got incompatible checked in for some reason. All right, let's see, on container change from, that should work. All right, we're going to set stage 20. Okay, and we're going to set up a prereq stage of 10. So they have to have the stage. So now this is where we can solve that. One of the problems I mentioned is that we don't want the objective. So if we set stage 20 as soon as they loot this, the problem with that is if they haven't got the objective, then they're going to get the second objective immediately. So then let's say we didn't have this prereq stage of 10. Then as soon as they loot it, stage 20 would get set. They wouldn't even have this quest yet, but all of a sudden they're going to get the objective, return the wrench to Gath, which is going to be confusing. Why would we do that? I mean, you guys know why you would do it, but for the player to just randomly skip to a second objective would feel very jarring. So you can prevent that from happening by saying, we only want that to happen if they already have stage 10 done. That's what that prereq stage is. So only trigger stage 20 if that happens. Okay, so now we've got it prevented from showing them an objective too early, but that also means that we no longer have a way to set stage 20 after they do have the objective. So we're going to solve for that now. So we're going to go ahead and once again save. And now we're going to get to merging in kind of a third set of tutorials, which is the scripting stuff, but not really. I'm keeping the scripting very light on this stuff so far. But I'm going to show you guys a little trick we can do here. So you guys are going to learn. If you haven't followed along with the Papyrus stuff, you're going to learn a little something new here, and that's the if statement. So we're going to do if. Now, I like to use parentheses in my ifs. You do not have to. They're not required. So you can actually, so whether you do this or you just hit a space and start typing, either way works the same. I like the parentheses because it's just languages I use most commonly require them. So we're going to do if game.getPlayer. This is a thing you can call from anywhere to get access to the player. And we're going to say get item count, and we need to figure out the item. We're going to call it pipe wrench alias, and I'll show you how we get access to that in a second. And let's see, pipe wrench alias dot get ref. There's a lot going on right here. Don't worry, I'll explain it all in just a moment. All right, get item count is greater than 0. And if. And so I'm actually gonna step you guys through that, because I really want you guys to pick that stuff up, because there's a lot going on there, but it's very simple. It's just I wrote it all in one line to keep my little script line, but we're gonna extend it out. I'm gonna write it line by line and walk you through it. But then we're gonna do set stage 20. So notice that we're in stage 10. So we're basically we're offering an opportunity for it to skip right to stage 20 from stage 10 if they already have it in their inventory. So let's walk through this again. So another way, if you followed around with my scripting, another way to write this would be object reference player equals game.getPlayer. So that's the first thing we're doing there. The next thing we could do is we could say object reference pipe wrench equals pipe wrench alias.getRef. So we've talked about aliases in many of these different lessons, and an alias basically just holds a pointer to something in the world. And the getRef function you can call in any alias to get access to the object itself. And then you can check, and you can use the object in the function getItemCount. So then another way we could write this is we could write int, and we'll call this item count equals player.getItemCount pipe wrench. And then we could rewrite this little bit down here. Instead of it being this big, long, confusing line, is we could just say if item count is greater than 0. And now hopefully that makes this a little clearer for you guys. So basically we're just saying, take the player, get the pipe wrench alias, which means it's the exact one for our quest, and then count the items. How many of that particular one does the player have in their inventory? And if it's greater than 0, then we know the player already looted it off camera, and we're good to go there. So now the last problem we're going to have is if we try and compile this, it doesn't know what pipe wrench alias is. So right now, game.getPlayer is something that's defined right in the base game. You can access that without anything. These things we defined ourselves, so those are fine. Even the item count is fine. So those are all fine. So the only thing we have to account for is this pipe wrench alias. So that's where properties come into play. So if you've done a lot of my scripting lessons, this is going to be no problem for you. If you've never done these, this is something new you're about to learn for all your needs. This is very, very handy. But we're going to go ahead and select this, and that'll bring up this properties window. We're going to hit add property, and we're going to choose a reference alias. So you guys are familiar with reference alias because that's what we select on the alias screen when we right click and hit new reference alias. So basically we're give a script access to something outside of it, with the exceptions of things like the player. You pretty much need to tell it everything it needs access to, anything in the game world, anything else in the creation kit. You have to give it access to it through this properties thing. So we called the thing, we called it pipe wrench alias. So we're going to make sure we use that exact same name. And I like to check in mandatory, and all mandatory does is it makes it flag red on this screen if you forget to fill it in. So that way you can see at a glance that you need to fill that in. So we'll go ahead and hit OK here. Now, there is a way to make it so it'll automatically fill in your aliases if you made the name of your property match exactly, but I clearly failed at that. I think it was just called wrench. If I had just called it wrench alias, it would have worked, but it didn't. So we'll just double click that, and then this will give us a list of our aliases. And here we go, wrench. We'll select that. And so now, anytime the way the properties work is this name here, this property name, anytime I use that in my script, it's talking about whatever I define right here. So it's just a variable. It's just the pipe wrench alias in my script now means the wrench alias is what all it means. And we could point that to a different quest or different alias, and the code would always stay the same. So that's all that is. The property is, hey, I'm going to define some piece of text I'm going to use in my script, and I'm going to tell you what it is. And that's what a script property is. So now we can compile this, and hopefully it goes through without issue. There we go. So now we've got, they get the quest. If they're going to immediately get the objective to get the wrench, it's then going to check their inventory. If they already have it, it'll immediately set stage 20. So then stage 20 will fire. It's going to complete objective 10. So it'll immediately complete that objective that says they need to fix the wrench, and it'll say return it to kinggath. Or to Gath, and then that'll display, and then they'll be eligible to talk to Gath again. And when they do, it will complete all of the objectives and complete the quest and give us the XP. So that's all set up now. So we've got everything done here. We can pop into game, and this should all work. So I'll meet you in there. Okay, I love when this stuff happens because it gives me an opportunity to show you guys some stuff that might happen to you. Now, I've actually shown this before. I've had the same issue pop up, but I realized that there was some stuff I was going to do that I've covered in previous videos, and I don't like to just rehash it. I figure you guys know this about how to do the lip generation, but there was something I forgot that I should mention. If we are renaming quests and we're going to try and reuse old dialogue, I needed to copy all of that dialogue from the other spots. So we had our KG questing, or I'm sorry, dialogue 104, I believe is what I copied this from. So I went in and grabbed those files. So I'm going to copy and paste them over here. And we'll go ahead and say yes to that. And then I've got my lip fuser stuff I'll run through. But more importantly, we got the player voice lines. But then I saw we have all of this stuff in here. And I checked them and realized one of our lines didn't show up correctly. It showed up for every NPC but us, and this will happen occasionally to you. When this happens, fortunately it's very easy to fix. Is you just grab the file from one of these and drop it into your appropriate voice type. So we can do that, and then we can just delete all the rest of these. Now, the reason that this happens occasionally is when you're setting up a particular line. So in this case, it was this line right here. Occasionally, if you go to record it immediately after writing it, the conditioning hasn't been determined by the game yet, and so it thinks it belongs to every NPC. A way to avoid that is before you start recording, any of your lines is hit OK, save. Another thing you could do is just double check before you start recording. So if I would have paid attention on this screen right here, I would have seen that there were a lot of different voice types here, and maybe there weren't at the time when I did this, and maybe when you guys are watching this video, you'll be able to quickly scrub back and see. But again, it's the safest way to guarantee that it's correct is to first, after you get all your lines in there, hit OK, save your plugin, go back in, and then right before you record them, just pay attention to this screen right here. Make sure it only has the voice type you expected. If it doesn't, if it's lacking the voice type you expect or has a bunch of them there, make sure you check your conditions. In our case, as we talked about in the dialogue tutorial that we originally set this up in, we set a voice type check right on the quest itself so that we don't need to worry about it on each of our scenes. But depending on how complicated your setup is, that might not work. You might need to just condition individual actions or individual scenes. So pay attention to that. So that is the thing that came up for me. So I'm going to go ahead and finish doing my, I'll clean this up, delete all these extra folders. All I need are the player voice lines we copied from the previous tutorial, the dialogue VT Gath, and then I'm going to generate the voice files. And you guys can see that in previous tutorials if you're not familiar. But wanted to cover the couple of issues there, of the one of having to copy sound files over and reminding you of what to do when you run into this nonsense. Okay, so generally when I'm doing these tutorials, I go into the game and do a quick off-camera test before I record just to make sure that I didn't make any mistakes. This time I did make a mistake, and I want to walk you guys through what I did wrong. So when we set up our second scene for turn-in, I forgot to check in player dialogue first. Now, the reason this is important is because a general scene, so if you think about something like this line right here, will never actually play unless the scene starts. So this line cannot be played just arbitrarily. Something has to cause it to happen. And the way that happens is through a greeting line. And you can find out which greeting lines you have set up on the miscellaneous tab. So you've got your hellos. Those are kind of a greeting. And then you definitely have the section called greetings, which will be named whatever ID you gave when you first added a greeting, which we covered in the Dialogue 104 tutorial where we probably covered it in multiple, but that's the one that this came from. So we would have named that greeting. So what I found out when I came in to troubleshoot the fact that Gath was not speaking the second line, I noticed that my second greeting was missing. So if you find the case, that could be the case for yourself. So I came in here, I checked in player dialogue. Now what I actually saw, in fact, I'm going to show you what I did completely. So we're going to go ahead and this is just going to be demo mistake. And so this is what we did before. We went right click here, we did new actor, we added him, we added a phase at the end, and then we added a piece of dialogue and we typed in our line, and we're just going to put in demonstration. Doesn't actually matter what's here. And then we set up all of our conditions and we thought we were all good. But what the problem here is that this is just a phase in a scene and there's nothing to start this scene. A scene either has to be triggered through a script or through a greeting. So that was the mistake we made. Now to fix it, what's cool is we can do a couple of things. One, we would check in player dialogue and now we'll get this new greeting. Now we can open up the line that we had and you can double click it and then we can just copy this text over and then hit OK, and then come back into here and go ahead and paste that in. So now we've got our greeting set up, which is cool, but then we had all that other stuff we did. So we had set something like we had set up the stage to run when it was done. We had all these conditions set up. Well, the conditions, we had multiple. You can actually right click here and hit copy all conditions and then go in the other one and hit paste. So then we could come in here, and obviously I didn't actually copy anything because this is just me demoing what I already did to fix the other one. But then you just right click here, paste, it would paste them all in, and then we would recheck in that. And so that would be how we would fix that particular one and then remove the other stage because we don't need, or the other phase because we don't need it. This thing is all kind of self-contained. So that was the mistake we made in the thing you saw me. So as you can see, I fixed it in here. I changed it to the greeting by copying the conditions over, copying this, setting up my stage 30, and making sure player dialogue was checked in so that this actually appeared. And now, as you guys saw in here, is that we had the multiple. In fact, we even have 3, and I'm gonna have to delete that extra one before we pop in game to show you guys. So hopefully that's the last thing. I know I made one other mistake, but this is actually a good one for me to show you in the game. So I'm gonna leave it there, and we'll talk about it in the game because fixing it is very easy, and it was not a mistake in methods I taught you. It was me misclicking something. Some of you guys probably caught me do. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete out this demo scene, and then I will meet you in the game here. And yes, we do want to continue. Okay, we're good to save. Okay, we are in my sanctuary clean save that I keep, and here's Gath. Hey, how's it going? Wait a second, aren't you the one who stole my wrench? What are you talking about? That wrench you have looks exactly like the one I lost this morning. I know how you can make this right. I've got a lead on another. Go fetch it for me. We should get our objective. There we go. And let's make sure that shows up on the map. There it is. And now the random lines should show up if we talk to them again. I see you don't have my wrench yet. Had a chance to snag that wrench yet? I'd be a lot friendlier if I had a wrench. There we go. Okay, and now I'm going to show you guys some of my favorite console commands. So we need to get over there and test this. A couple ways we could do this. One is you could use the command COC and then the cell name, and you can actually find the cell name. Where's the CK here? The thing we clicked on right here, this little section, the cell view, the cell names you can COC to are listed right here. You can just type that in. So we could do COC Concord EXT, but I'm going to show you a more fun one that I like to use when the objective is not that far. So first up, we're going to turn on TGM God mode before we do this because we need to go to Concord and the Raiders are still alive there. And the second command I'm going to show you will cause you to die if you're not in God mode. So we're going to go ahead and hit PRID 14. That selects the player. And we're going to do set value speed mult, speed M-U-L-T, and then 400. So 100 is your base multiplier. 400 means 4 times as fast. As always, I will mention the fact that mess up there is because my LOD mod is loose files, unfortunately, and so it's always active even if I disable it. But you can see we go real fast and we can make our way right over. And the reason you want TGM is because if you bump into anything movable like a car, then the physics is multiplied as well. So you can actually be damaged by movable objects in this game. So now you would be damaged 4 times as hard, and for whatever reason, that combined with your speed creates this like 16 times damage base effectively or something like. I'm not sure exactly how the math on it, but you die pretty much instantly if you run into a car. Okay, so here's the other mistake I mentioned. You can see it's in this container instead of this one. I'm gonna go open my inventory while we talk about this, because otherwise all you're gonna hear is those idiots. Basically, it's most likely that garage cabinet there that is actually in, it just has a really big hitbox. So when I thought I was clicking on the reference in the CK to the toolbox, it's probably was just selecting that thing underneath it. When that happens to you, the best thing to do is select the thing you keep selecting by accident, pushing 1 twice on your keyboard in the CK to hide it, and then your other item will be exposed, so when you double click it, it grabs it. But we're gonna just go ahead and just live with this for this demo. There we go, get the wrench, get the return to Gath, our objective updated, and now we can easily outrun these raiders at our 4x speed and let Preston deal with them. So let's go do that. And make our way back. Whoop. And again, if we wanted to, we could have COC'd back to Sanctuary. I believe the Sanctuary cells are Sanctuary EXT, like 01 through whatever. In general, that's a common naming scheme with the cells, is it'll be the name you expect, and then with EXT at the end of it. All right, let's head in here. And here's Gath. Let's see that this triggers. Oh, great, you found it. That makes 2 of us. Mine was in my toolbox all along. And we should get, there we go, completed wrench hunt. A thing we forgot to do there was to actually remove this item from their inventory, which is pretty important, and it's really easy to do. I've showed you guys that in the other tutorials about fetch quests, so if you need to do that, you can go check that out. But now you have the capabilities for doing kill quests, fetch quests, and managing it all through dialogue or through triggered items. You guys have a full toolkit here to play with. So I think you can do a lot of stuff. We will continue to go in deeper in this series, both quest and dialogue. There's still so many more tricks and stuff I can teach you, but you guys have the basics. That is the toolkit there. The tools I've given you now are the basics that make up pretty much every quest in the game, with the exception of some of the really complicated things that involve animated items or things like that. The majority of things are done based just the way I showed you. Triggering quests, or I'm sorry, triggering stages based on interacting with things or talking to people, showing objectives, and checking for items. That's most of the game. You can make most quests now with just the information I've given you so far if you followed the 4 dialogue quests and these 6 questing. I'm sorry, the 4 dialogue lessons and these 6 questing lessons, but I will cover a lot more in the future. If you guys have any requests for any lessons in particular, go ahead and throw them down in the comments. Some of the time when I get derailed from a particular path, like I was on the mission of doing all these quests and dialogue for a while, and then I started doing some other ones, usually it's because somebody requests something that I know I can do fairly quickly, or that I can understand why that would be a pressing thing. Like the last one I did on the decompiling papyrus, there was a conversation that came up in our Discord. I realized that people need that information if they want to learn how to reverse engineer, and so that some of those will come in because I am looking at this from the long term. We're going to be continuing to develop more lessons, and in 10 years when Bethesda is still using the same game engine, this stuff will all still be relevant. So I'm going for the long haul. We're not rushing through this. So if you guys have any that need to come up a little sooner for you, feel free to request them below. And for those of you guys who have already done so, if I haven't covered your topic, it's likely because I don't consider myself an expert on it, or I am just waiting until I have more foundational knowledge. Some of you guys have asked for fairly advanced things that I don't feel like there's enough tutorials or lessons I can point to be like, go watch these first and then you'll be ready for this. And that's kind of important to me with Bethesda Mod School, is that I can point to my own videos to show you guys any of the prerequisite knowledge you would need in order to follow a particular lesson. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.